Rain hammered the windows of St. Mercy Veterans Hospital when they wheeled Sergeant Major Elias Boone through the emergency doors. He had stopped breathing 7 minutes earlier. But everyone in the trauma bay noticed the dog first. Atlas, a massive black Belgian Malinois, stood beside the stretcher with his muzzle pressed against Elias's hand. The veteran's fingers were cold. His eyes were closed. A white bandage covered the left side of his head, and blood had soaked through his uniform. Atlas refused to move. 2 security officers tried pulling his leash. The dog growled. "Easy, buddy," one officer said. "He's gone." Atlas's growl became a warning. Dr. Marcus Hale stepped forward. "Sedate him if you have to. We need the body." Then a quiet nurse appeared. Her name was Nora Vale. She was new, small, soft-spoken, and so forgettable that one resident had called her the Shadow during her first week. Nora stopped beside Atlas. She did not touch him. She simply looked into his eyes and whispered one word: home. The dog froze. Every person in the room froze with him. Atlas slowly lifted his head. Then, for the first time since Elias arrived, he stepped away from the stretcher. Nobody understood what they had just witnessed. Nora did. She had seen it before. 3 years earlier, on a battlefield half a world away, another dog had heard that same word from her. But Nora had buried that memory so deeply that even she believed it was dead. "Get him into surgery," she said quietly. Dr. Hale stared at her. "Excuse me, his pupils are unequal. His left lung isn't expanding. He's got internal bleeding. If you wait for the scan, he won't survive." The room went silent. A resident laughed nervously. "Nurse, that's not your call." Nora lowered her eyes. "I know." She turned away. Then the monitor screamed. Elias's heart rhythm collapsed. Code blue. Doctors surged around him. Atlas barked once and lunged toward the stretcher. Nora moved faster than anyone expected. "Stop compressions for 2 seconds." Dr. Hale snapped. "Why?" "Because his chest is filling." As she grabbed an ultrasound probe. "There's fluid around the heart." The surgeon looked at the screen. She was right. "Pericardial tamponade," he whispered. Nora pointed. "Needle now." Dr. Hale hesitated only a fraction of a second. Then he acted. A needle entered Elias's chest. Dark blood filled the syringe. His heart began beating again. The room erupted, but nobody celebrated, because Nora had just made a diagnosis that 3 physicians had missed. Dr. Hale looked at her differently. "Where did you learn that?" Nora removed her gloves. "Somewhere you wouldn't want to go." Before he could ask, Atlas began barking again. Not at Elias. At Nora. The dog's ears stood straight. He walked toward her, sniffed her hands, and suddenly pressed his forehead against her chest. Nora's face went pale. "No," she whispered. Atlas whined. "You're mistaken." Dr. Hale watched them. "What does he know?" Nora stepped backward. "Nothing." But Atlas knew. He remembered her scent. He remembered the smoke. He remembered a night when Elias had been unconscious in a ruined convoy, and another medic had carried him through gunfire. That medic had been Nora. Only then did the first twist emerge. Nora was not merely a nurse. She had once been a classified military combat medic known by the call sign Raven. And Elias Boone had once been the commander who saved her life. Years earlier, Raven had been ordered to evacuate 12 wounded soldiers from a collapsed building. She had stayed behind after everyone else was extracted. A blast buried her. Elias returned for her. He dragged her out with one arm while carrying Atlas with the other. But Nora never knew what happened afterward. She had been medically discharged, her records sealed, and her memory fractured by trauma. Elias had spent years believing Raven died that night. Now he was lying unconscious 3 meters away. Nora looked at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. Dr. Hale heard her. "Tell you what?" Before Nora could answer, Elias suddenly moved. His hand closed around Atlas's collar. His lips barely formed a sound. "Raven." Nora stopped breathing. Atlas began crying. The entire trauma bay fell silent. Dr. Hale stared at her. "That was your call sign." Nora nodded. But the biggest shock was still coming. Elias's blood pressure dropped again. Massive hemorrhage. The anesthesiologist shouted. Nora immediately looked at the monitor. "His clotting is failing." Dr. Hale said, "We need massive transfusion." "Not enough." "What?" "His blood type is rare." Dr. Hale checked the chart. "Negative." Nora shook her head. "His military file says Bombay phenotype." Everyone stared. Hale grabbed the blood bank phone. Nothing matched. The hospital had no compatible units. Elias was dying. Nora closed her eyes. Then she remembered something. Atlas. The dog lifted his head. "Take me to his truck." Security protested. But Nora was already moving. They followed her into the rain. Elias's battered military pickup sat beneath a street lamp. Atlas jumped inside and began scratching at the rear compartment. Nora opened it. Inside was a locked medical case. Dr. Hale frowned. "What's that?" Nora knew immediately. Emergency field blood. She broke the seal. Inside were 4 frozen units, preserved for combat deployment. But there was another surprise. A handwritten note rested on top. "Raven, if you're reading this, I failed to tell you something. You didn't survive because I saved you. I survived because you saved me. Elias." Nora's eyes filled with tears. The blood was compatible, they rushed it inside. 20 minutes later Elias's heartbeat stabilized, but he remained unconscious. Nora sat beside him through the night. Atlas lay at her feet. At dawn Dr. Hale entered. "I owe you an apology." Nora looked up. "For what?" "For treating you like someone who only carried trays and followed orders." She smiled faintly. "I was good at following orders." "No," he said. "You were good at knowing when an order was wrong." Then Elias opened his eyes. Atlas stood instantly. Elias looked toward the dog, then toward Nora. His voice was barely audible. "Home." Nora broke down. She leaned over the bed. "I thought you were dead." Elias smiled. "So did everyone." Atlas placed his head between them. For the first time in years, Nora remembered the entire night. She remembered carrying Elias. She remembered whispering, "Home," because she promised him they would both make it. And she remembered something else. Elias had not returned for her by accident. He had disobeyed a direct order. He had risked an entire mission to save one medic. Nora finally understood why her records had been sealed. The military had protected the truth because the rescue exposed a command failure that could have destroyed careers. Elias had taken the blame. Nora looked at him. "You carried that secret for me." He shook his head. "For us." Weeks later, Elias left the hospital walking slowly with a cane. Atlas stayed beside him. Nora stood at the entrance watching. Elias stopped. "Coming." She laughed through tears. "Where?" He pointed toward the parking lot. "Home." Atlas barked. Nora walked toward them. The next morning something happened. Atlas refused to leave Nora's side. When an orderly joked that the dog had chosen his new handler, Nora smiled and knelt beside him. "I don't think he chose me," she said. Elias, standing nearby, answered, "He remembered you." That sentence changed everything. For years, Nora had believed surviving the battlefield meant forgetting it. She had avoided photographs, military ceremonies, even the sound of helicopters. Yet standing between Elias and Atlas, she finally realized survival was not betrayal. She could remember without returning to the war. Dr. Hale later placed a framed photograph in the trauma bay. Elias, Atlas, and Nora outside the hospital doors. Beneath it, he wrote 3 words. "Everyone gets home." The photograph became a reminder for every exhausted nurse, family, and wounded veteran who entered those doors, because sometimes medicine repairs the body, sometimes loyalty repairs the heart, and sometimes a word can bring a life back from the darkness. Behind her, Dr. Hale watched the quiet nurse everyone had underestimated. She had entered the hospital as a shadow, she left as a legend. And sometimes, the heroes who save lives are not the loudest people in the room. Sometimes they are the ones who whisper when everyone else is shouting. Sometimes they are the ones who have survived battles nobody can see. And sometimes all a wounded soul needs is one familiar word to remember that the war is over. If this story touched your heart, remember the people who carry invisible scars, and remember that courage does not always look powerful. Sometimes it looks like a quiet nurse standing beside a broken soldier, refusing to give up. Subscribe for more unforgettable stories of courage, sacrifice, and redemption, because somewhere out there, another forgotten hero may still be waiting for someone to whisper, "Home."